Yeah, we're going to get underway shortly. We're just waiting for some people to go pick up copies. Okay. I did. No. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I have to go to the library.
Okay, like my committee members to please take their seats. We're going to get underway with our full committee work session, and if I may have Representative Kenny please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we have 5 bills that we want to discuss today, and I want to draw your attention to a document that I had prepared from our researcher, Christy Ausfresser, regarding the definition of animal foster home or foster care in state statutes. I had asked her what do other states have in regard to animal foster care provisions and in their statutes, and are they considered extensions of animal shelters? Do other states require any special care for shelters to provide for pregnant and lactating cats and dogs? So if you can, kind of read through it, but I think it's interesting with regard to like Illinois, New Jersey, Virginia, they have, definitions of foster care, foster home. And with that in mind, we can open up our discussion on SB 475, including a determination of the best interest of the animal in the definition of foster home. And I know that there were somebody was working on an amendment for that. Was Kelly working on that? I know she had.
Madam Chair, Kelly was submitting an amendment, I do believe.
Okay. And I think I'm looking through my emails here to see what we had. Oh, here. She sent that Monday. And I guess what she wanted to make a definition of a pet vendor foster home. That there would be a new paragraph, pet vendor foster home definition in RSA 437:1. By inserting after paragraph 5, a new paragraph 6, that a pet vendor foster home means a private residence in New Hampshire associated with and inspected by a pet vendor licensed under RSA 437:3 that is used to provide temporary physical custody and care at such private residence for the pet vendor's animals, including but not limited to pregnant or lactating animals, when it is deemed to be in the best interest of that animal's health, safety, and well-being as determined by a New Hampshire licensed veterinarian. Um, I don't know if you all saw that or what are your thoughts on that, Representative Comtois?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in listening to what you said, I just want to make sure that I understand the amendment correctly. She is putting in a definition for a pet vendor foster home, not just a foster home, but a pet vendor foster home. Is that correct?
That's what it sounds like, yes.
Thank you.
Representative Howard.
Um, Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you please repeat just the first three
Sure.
words? Just there were two verbs in there. I missed the first one.
So a pet vendor foster home means a private residence in New Hampshire associated with and inspected by a pet vendor licensed under RSA 437:3 that is used to provide temporary physical custody and care at such private residence for the pet vendor's animals, including but not limited to pregnant or lactating animals, when it is deemed to be in the best interest of that animal's health, safety, and well-being as determined by a New Hampshire licensed veterinarian. You sure may.
Thank you. Do you think that by associated with, she means associated with a particular vendor?
It would
Or-
be with a particular pet vendor. Mm-hmm. Anybody have any other thoughts? Representative Haskins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to recall, was it Patricia Morris that was concerned about unannounced inspections? So I was trying to determine, as I listened to her, is a foster home just going to be a private residence? And is that subject to inspections of what kind versus a facility? We had both of those, that language was being tossed around. Maybe somebody can help me distinguish whether a pet foster home, one position is that it's just a private residence. Another position appeared to be that it was a facility of some sort.
Representative Bixby?
Okay, so there is currently in rule a foster home or a fostering definition, and the commissioner can provide more details about what that exactly looks like. But there is something in rule that involves fostering at a facility, and that facility is subject to inspection. And the reason that Kelly chose to add the pet vendor in front as a qualifier for foster home is to distinguish it from what's already in rule, so that it won't be confused. And so the having a pet vendor foster home, there is a level of inspection because the pet vendor is licensed by the state, and the pet vendor does have the capacity to inspect the foster home, but it is not opening that foster home up to
State inspection.
state inspection unless there is something that
Complaint.
rises to the level of like a cruelty investigation or something. So the idea was, by making it specific to pet vendor, to being used for a pet vendor to foster animals that are lactating or pregnant, that would make sure that it's just the home environment. It's not any other kind of environment, and that it's still under the oversight of the pet vendor.
And also, just so that you know, in the report that
It's listed here.
Christy
Yeah.
Osfresser provided us with, we do have the administrative rules
Right.
from New Hampshire that discusses foster facilities. So
And
we're talking about your amendment. Well, I read it from what you sent in the email. I don't know if, yeah, if you can get the copies and hand them out to everybody, that would be helpful. Yeah, so, so the amendment just basically defines a pet vendor foster home. And that pet vendor foster home would then be under the auspices of the pet vendor that's already licensed and inspected, that they are also under the auspices of the Department of Agriculture and Markets and Food. So the state wouldn't necessarily have to go in and do any inspections, but the pet vendor would. Yeah, Representative Hassel.
Does that preclude a private home that's not associated with a facility, doesn't have a pet vendor license?
Right. So it could be a private house, your house. If
Okay.
you're working for,
A nonprofit,
a
let's say?
nonprofit
Okay.
who's rescuing cats, and they say, "Oh, we've got this pregnant cat. Can you hang
Okay.
on to her until she's whatever?" So you're doing them a service, whether you get paid for it or not. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's not neither here nor there, but you're doing that under the auspices of that organization.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Yeah, Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The commissioner did, I
Yep.
believe, had his hand up, so
Yeah.
if we could.
I'm gonna, we can wait a second or two for Kelly to come since it's her amendment and she can probably give us a little bit more insight. Thank you, Representative Wheeler. But,
Well, it'll be down in a minute.
Yeah.
but that's what, she was saying that, this way, it doesn't apply to any private homes that want to foster animals. I don't know. What?
Yeah, so my question is if someone's fostering an animal for somebody, a private person or whatever, then they wouldn't fall under this because they wouldn't be associated with the pet vendor.
Right.
Right.
Just want to clarify. Do the current rules deal with foster homes that aren't associated with pet vendors? I guess is my question. And I'm trying to look at this rule here that we have. So there's a couple of questions.
All right. Well, there you go. Okay, so now everybody has a copy. Okay. So Kelly, what was the impetus, the motivation behind this amendment?
This, after spending so many hours reading through rules and RSAs and all of that, I realized, I call it the Rep Comtois model, that this is the KISS model to fixing this issue. So we are defining pet vendor foster homes. So it takes away any issues that we could possibly have with a private family, a private home that's fostering, because this is directly connected with the pet vendor, and it defines it. And then this is a priority, of course, from the Senate, and this keeps everyone happy. So I don't feel as if there's going to be no invasion or inspections in people's private homes. There's a lot of single family homes that might foster based upon relationships and things like that. But this is pet vendors that are licensed with the state that already have these relationships in place. This this just cleans it all up. So I just think it's an easy amendment, and it fixes it, and we don't have to worry about any sort of conflicting with rules or any other statutes. It's a definition, and then of course it adds in the pregnant and lactating animals, and everything else follows pretty much currently with rules, of course. It says in rules right now, it talks about animal medical. That's the same thing for health, safety, and well-being, and of course still determined by a New Hampshire licensed veterinarian.
Okay. Commissioner, please come up and lend us your thoughts on that.
So this is the same thing as what's in 475 now, except that it's taking out the inspection by the pet vendor, which is a really concerning issue. Because if you read 475 as it is, a foster home means a private residence in New Hampshire associated with and inspected by a pet vendor licensed under. That takes that part out. Actually, it associated with, okay. All right, excuse me. So I don't really know what the difference is, except it's putting pet vendor first. There would be no other type of foster home because the only people who can use foster homes are pet vendors anyhow. So I'm not sure what this does. And I do apologize. I read that quickly and thought that the inspected.
Representative Bixby.
So I think the distinction here is that what we have in the bill is exclusively a residential location, and it doesn't cover any other type of place where you might foster an animal. And the reason that's significant is because there are certain benefits you get out of having out of fostering an animal in a residential location, and as opposed to a facility that is more commercial.
If I may,
Certainly.
that's what 475 says. Foster home means a private residence in New Hampshire. So I was asking that a facility be included, or to make another section about, I don't know why you would, because it was asked, well, who else would be fostering? And so if I may, currently the Conway Area Humane Society, licensed pet vendor, has a dog in foster with severe behavioral issues. This dog is at a facility called Carla's Pet Rendezvous. Carla's Pet is a business that does training and boarding. This dog is being fostered in this facility, receiving behavioral rehabilitation. Some veterinarian offices have boarding facilities for dogs that need certain type of care for behavioral or medical rehabilitation. They don't necessarily need to be hospitalized, but they need to be rehabilitated under supervision. A northern pet vendor sent a dog to board and train for behavioral rehabilitation. A dog or cat may need physical therapy at a rehabilitation facility, and there is a facility in Dover. So my concern is, and our concern is, that if we don't allow animals to be fostered at a facility, well, you wouldn't if it's not a private residence. That's the problem, is that there would, it would seem to be in conflict. So I don't understand why not put a facility in to allow it, or simply put another paragraph, but I think it's somewhat redundant.
Okay, if I may, I'm not seeing where under 1705 it says that it's a private residence.
It doesn't now, but the problem is we would have to change 1705 to conform with the law, and the law would no longer allow that. It could be a stretch now.
Okay, so I think that the reason that we put the put pet vendor foster home as opposed to just foster home in this, in the bill was to avoid the conflict with 1705.
Correct.
1705 is governed by the statute. We will need to
Okay.
change 1705 if the statute no longer allows, and it could be argued that we shouldn't be allowing foster facilities at all under the current law, I believe, because there's really no mention of it. But when you specifically mention it, now we don't have a tie back to the law, and
Oh,
the law's changed. So I would be very uncomfortable having any type of,
Well, why wouldn't we then add, say, another paragraph that defines
Pet vendor facility.
non-private residence non-private residence foster facilities?
I don't have a problem with that, and I've said there could be another section. I'm not sure why
Oh.
it isn't just easier to add private facility or residence.
Well, because private residences don't want to be inspected by the state.
No, we wouldn't, in my proposal, there is no inspection by the state. We're not ever going to go and do that. You could add language. We're not going into any of these fosters to inspect. Our rules allow that only when there's a complaint. In our rules, that, could be codified. I don't have a problem with that, but I want to give you some real examples in real time right now why this is such a concern, that I've asked that all foster homes shall be annually registered with the department on such forms as the rules shall prescribe. And this is what I asked you for. And this is current. One licensed pet vendor in New Hampshire is a New Hampshire cat rescue, which utilizes fosters extensively. They had several cats in foster homes recently get sick with a contagious respiratory virus, but the rescue wasn't keeping up-to-date foster records, and they had no records of those cats in foster, which they are required to keep. The only way that we found out about the 6 cats in foster was because the local veterinarian reported the diseased cats to the state veterinarian's office. When our department inspector inspected the cat rescue, not the foster facility, twice this month to find out where the diseased cats were located, both times our inspector asked the facility if they had any cats in foster. Both times the facility said no cats were in foster. Yet shortly after each inspection, another sick cat in foster was reported to our office by the veterinarian. This demonstrates gross lack of foster record and lack of proper management of cats in the foster system, either intentional cover-up or complete absent-mindedness, which has made it difficult to track and control the spread of this virus. Another situation is a New Hampshire dog rescue that was running at full capacity in their main facility, while also having multiple dogs in foster. A series of unexpected circumstances caused several of their foster homes to relinquish their foster dogs back to the dog rescue at the same time. This caused the rescue facility to run over capacity, and they experienced overcrowding and multiple management errors with the animals. Finally, an emergency dispersal of animals to other New Hampshire rescues became necessary. This demonstrates what happens when a licensed pet vendor doesn't count and track the number of animals they have in foster relative to their own facility's capacity. The department encounters many examples like this. Animals get lost or forgotten in foster. There is difficulty conducting a disease traceback for animals in foster, and sometimes ownership disputes occur for the animals in foster. All these issues could be alleviated by the licensed pet vendor keeping adequate foster records. We are constantly reminding licensees that they are not required to keep track of the animals in foster, that they are required to keep track of their animals in foster and keep up-to-date foster lists. But it's remarkable how many of them don't keep up with it. So we have a real problem here. We're asking for your help.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for being here. So what you're saying, and I just want to make sure I understand this, is that a pet vendor, a licensed pet vendor in the state of New Hampshire, whether it be a home or facility, where they have animals. At some point, there's a capacity limit at those places. So are we saying that they can go over that capacity unlimited? So instead of saying, okay, you can go over 10% of capacity in foster, just in case all the animals come back. But if they're going over at 50% of what their capacity is, and then everyone relinquishes, sounds like what you're saying, then we have a real problem on our hands. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the issue.
There, you are understanding it, and that was part of what I asked the Senate. It is in our rules that foster facilities cannot be used as an extension of space. And that is what happens, and here's a prime example. The Senate wasn't willing to do that. I didn't come and ask you to put that language in there. I think that we can still have that in rules, because I think that's implied that, you know, if you're licensed to have 10 dogs in your facility and you're using a foster, that doesn't mean you can have 20 dogs, because we know that sometimes they're going to come back for medical, behavioral reasons, or that in fact something happened with the family and the family was no longer willing or able to do that. So that there needs to be enough space in the facilities. And so there is a real problem here. We're not, you know, we're not trying to be difficult. The last thing we want to do is inspect more places. And
Representative Comtois, follow up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So just, you know, I deal with numbers. So, so based on what you're saying, so if your facility could handle 50 dogs, you can say, and if you're at full capacity, you can have 10% of that number, meaning 5 dogs, could be out at foster cares. I think 10% is a reasonable number that you could have just in case all those dogs come back. I think having, you know, it upwards of 20 to 25% creates a real issue. What are your thoughts?
so I think that's reasonable, because it's unlikely that they'll all come back. I mean, we prefer it not to be any increase in facility capacity, but if the legislature said, hey, we don't think everything's going to come back, and, you know, you could be a little bit tight at times, certainly as a compromise, 10% more than your facility. And some places don't have limits because they manage things well, so we don't put a limit. But our problematic facilities, we do put a limit on them, regardless maybe how many cages they have. It's on their ability to manage the animals, and that tends to be our biggest problem. And I think that's why we say we don't want it to be used as an extension, but I understand the concern.
Okay, can I have Representative Potenza then?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to comment on your testimony. Basically, you're saying, for the most part, that there are licensed pet vendors or facilities that are not following the rules or the law. That doesn't apply to this legislation at all. So, you know, bad actors are going to do bad things. We have bad actors throughout everywhere in every space, to include in our government. And I'm looking here at the rules. Rules are pretty much the same as law. They're treated like that. And I'm looking at Ag 170505. So that's why I spent a very long time on writing this amendment. Foster facilities is completely, before that is defined in here what a foster facility is, and then it talks about it here, A, B, C, D, E, all of those types of things. So, and then their license is already giving them those kinds of numbers and all of that. If there are things that you need to do in rules, then you should, you know, to feel as if they need to be stronger or something like that, then you have that in your authority to do so. But in Ag 1705.5 foster facilities, all of these things are covered, and I don't see a necessity for us to create any further law.
May I respond?
You may.
This law, this bill 475, was a response to our rules, saying we don't like your rules. because our rules were saying this was for medical or behavioral rehabilitation. As I've said before, things had been looser than I would have liked to have seen, and there were animals going out when they were lactating or pregnant. So you've already, and we said, no, this is what we're allowed under the rules. This is the way it is. Senator Birdsall and others said, no, we want you to include lactating animals. I said, fine, but if you're going to do that, then we need to have some controls, because this opens up, there were very few people who were going beyond what we were allowed. Virtually everybody, by the time the bill was filed, was keeping their lactating pregnant animals within their facilities. So now this bill opens it up, and I do not have the authority to pull out of thin air the ability to write rules. Every single section of rules has to be tied back to a section of law. And so I can't just go out and do things that are not specific in there. And sometimes rules, I'll look at them and say, how is that determined that it was allowed? I'm a stickler. I am a real stickler. My wife is ready to divorce me a couple times over the fact that I am a stickler. And if it says something, that's what it is. So this is making it impossible for us to do this. Quite frankly, I would rather at this point that you just say, we're going to not regulate pet vending at all. Because if you're going to open it up to where people don't have to keep records, and there's nothing in there that gives us the ability to at least know what's happening is that animals are going to places we don't know they're there. The pet vendor's forgotten. That's not going to solve that, but at least if we have a list, we will know to be able to say, hey, at Peter Bixby's place, you're listing as a pet vendor for this year. Do you have any animals there? And, oh yeah, I forgot. And also what happens sometimes is animals get left there, and then the people assume they're their animals. And so because the pet vendor hasn't contacted them for a long time, and now this is what I read part of is that, oh no, that's my animal. It's been here for 6 months now. It's my animal. I'm not fostering it. But there's been no legal transfer. It's a mess.
Okay.
And this makes the mess worse.
Follow up. Okay. Kelly, Representative Potenza, follow up, and then Representative Bixby, and then I'll go back over here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to follow up on that because you said, so that this is where this whole thing started, right? Because I was like, okay, so where was the statutory authority that gave those rules that I just read off in that section? And there was none. There's none that gave you that. So this is what I'm saying. Your rulemaking authority, you said you don't have the authority, you actually do. And it's under, this is where I've spent hours on this. Under 439.9, your rulemaking authority, that blanket, the health and sanitation standards to effectuate the purposes of this subdivision, literally gives you authority over all of that. I'm sorry, it does.
Well-
and then licensing is giving you those numbers that you're talking about. If reporting is required from pet vendors and they're not doing it, then you should be asking us to put a penalty in or something like that. Because if people aren't reporting, if that's all part of their licenses, then that should be part of this too. So I don't really understand. I know where these rules came into effect are not based on statute. I have scoured, I've spent hours. So you did it based upon your
All right,
broader
so-
rulemaking authority.
So first of all, please, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I know, I'm just saying.
It was done. I am a stickler. I am working on that. And Jalkar is very, very much looking at these things, asking where the authority is. Health and sanitation does not give us the ability to require them to keep a list. And that's something that we've done in rules. I am very uncomfortable with doing anything in rules that is not in the statute, because having been a legislator for 23 years, I have a real problem with agencies going out and doing things that aren't specific in law. Now, these are old rules. I don't know what happened, but I'm not comfortable with them. I'm asking you for the specific help to do it so that there is no
Representative
question.
Bixby has a question.
Yeah, so sort of circling back to that, Uh, so it sounds like there is not currently a statute that is really explicit about there needing to be a rule about this. And you inherited this, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But
and
then
you
why-
would be, and follow up?
Yep.
And you'd be more comfortable if there were in fact a statute that was specific to this.
I think it's very important. Yes.
Okay, and so next follow-up, currently in the rule, it only talks about medical or behavioral reasons not lactating or pregnancy. And those could be looked at as different categories. And what the sort of place that would be appropriate for a behavior or medical fostering might not be the same place as appropriate for a lactating or pregnant fostering.
And that is very true. And I will tell you that we just recently had, now this, I think the most recent one, the animal didn't go into fostering legally. It was sent up from an out-of-state foster, didn't go through the proper channels, but it bit a child in the home. And that happens on more than one occasion. We had one recently that bit a child in a home. I don't recall if it was here legally or not. It should have immediately gone into quarantine. That animal was sent to Connecticut,
Follow up?
totally out of our control.
Okay, another follow-up? Yeah.
So if we were to further amend this, or if we were to do another amendment, it would probably make sense to have one section that was based on medical and behavioral fostering, and a separate section that was based on lactating and pregnant fostering.
I would absolutely agree with you.
Okay.
Representative Howard and then Minor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Representative Potenza and for the Commissioner. So what it seems to me is that this amendment expands the places where you can send fostered animals. And to me, it seems that that's all it does. It doesn't address the record keeping question or anything like that. I haven't scoured the rules like Representative Potenza has. But so my question for you is that your intent? Is just to increase the places that you could send fostered animals officially and
Correct. If there needs to be another piece of legislation that is to put in, certain guardrails or to give the commissioner the authority. I did want to say, I know that I was told as well that you weren't part of these, but then why is the effective date of what I told you, 170505 foster facilities, 12/31/24?
okay, I have another question.
I don't
for the
understand
Commissioner,
that.
though, So wait your turn.
Those were
So it's
those rules
2024.
those
You were in
rules,
place.
look, I don't get involved in every single writing of every rule. Those were readopted rules. So yes,
So my question for the Commissioner is, do you see this expansion of places that the animals can be fostered as a sort of a gap where the rules sort of fall through and the records fall through, the ability to keep records falls through that gap?
it does, Representative, and I think that 475 expanded that, and that's why I've asked just for a very simple sentence here: all foster homes shall annually be registered with the department on such forms as the rules shall prescribe. That doesn't take care of the whole problem. There isn't a way to take care of the whole problem, because unless every animal that was fostered out was registered with the department, which I do not want, at least this gives us the ability to know what facilities are being used and to see that they were inspected. And that's
Representative
what I'm
Minor.
asking for.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we keep, and I think most people will agree with me, we keep going deeper and deeper in this rabbit hole. I think if we do what the commissioner asked, which was add another paragraph with pet vending facilities, this would put this all to bed. We're talking about stuff that's not even in this bill, and I don't think we're gaining grounds.
Okay, Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so in terms of having the record with the department, would it be the responsibility of the pet vendor to provide that information to the department, or the responsibility of the foster home to
Oh,
provide?
absolutely the pet vendor's responsibility. There's no intention, and if that's not cleared, but it would say on such forms as rules, as the rules shall prescribe, my intention would have been to have the rules state very clearly that it was the pet vendor's responsibility to register with us and annually show us that they inspected the facility.
And it doesn't put them at risk, the home fosters at risk of a surprise visit from the state.
No, that would only be in the case of a complaint, and quite frankly, I mean, we've got a case here, but I'm not really comfortable potentially with the rules. I think just if there is, I'd rather have that out of the rules, because I don't ever want to put the situation where somebody doesn't want us in there going in. It's a terrible situation for our inspectors to go into a home.
Representative
where they don't want
Comtois?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I understand that it would be the pet vendor's responsibility to have a list of homes with pet vendors. Would they be afforded that same privacy that we give to pet vendors, where the information cannot be shared with anybody, basically?
That would certainly be my intent, that that information would not be out there for the
Yeah,
public.
I agree.
We have licensed pet vendors there. That list is public because they're licensed by the state. These people are not. There's no problem, or in my mind, of saying, something to the fact that these shall not be. So the list of foster homes would not be subject to public disclosure.
Representative Howard?
Thank you,
Follow-up?
Madam. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe it is important that we put a limit on capacity. You said some people aren't, you don't have capacity, but I think it's important for that. I do think a 10% overflow, it should be the max. I believe that protects all involved. That is my personal opinion. What are your thoughts about putting that into an amendment?
That is certainly fine, and we could, over a period of time, we could give a limit to every facility, which probably isn't a bad thing. We wouldn't do it all at once. We license them annually, and as the licenses and the inspections came up, we could apply that, so we would know what that 10% is. I should look back at the assistant state vet, see what he thinks. Is he's the one who's overseeing that? Hopefully he hasn't been making faces back there as I've been speaking.
You have a question of putting a limit as being germane to the bill?
Yeah, I don't think we didn't discuss that. I don't think it's germane unless we're going to give in the bill some authority for pet vendor facilities and numbers, a line in there with giving you the statutory authority to put that into rules or something. I don't think it fits. I really don't.
Representative Howard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is still a work session, right? So
Yep.
I can make a suggestion. I agree with Representative Minor that that it might be just as simple as adding the sentence that the commissioner is asking for that would bring this bill into alignment with the rules and their needs. Keeping a list, it seems simple enough to me and strikes me as necessary. And I agree with Representative Potenza that the limits is not germane to this particular amendment.
Representative Minor?
Thank you, Representative Howard, for that. And I think, as she said, and I agree, that simple paragraph or simple insertion will put this to bed.
Representative Bixby? I thought
Yeah,
I
I'm-
saw your hand.
I still want to have a separation between the medical, behavioral, and the lactating pregnant. I think that because those are different categories, and I think that any amendment should reflect that. I'm kind of neutral about the capacity limit, but if people think that would be going beyond the scope of what came to us from the Senate, I'm not going to fight it.
No. Representative Comtois?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm okay with adding that. I also, but if we do that, I want to make sure that there is privacy protection for all of those foster homes written into the legislation. I think that's extremely important. As you know how I feel about the databases. But I also think, and maybe it is above the scope of this bill, but I think it is extremely important that we look at a capacity limit, if not now and in the future, because we don't want somebody that can only hold 50 animals and they farm out another 50 animals and 20 of those animals come back and they have no capacity for those animals, especially if they're sick or something. I mean, we're courting disaster. I think it's extremely important.
Okay. Well, given all that we've discussed, is there anybody interested in tackling, amending this further than what this? And I actually like the pet vendor foster home definition, because and I think that maybe perhaps we might venture to have another definition for that is not a private residence, that is a facility, because there is a difference there, and it is a difference insofar as how they are licensed and reporting and so forth.
So
Representative Bixby,
yeah,
and then
I agree.
So the way that we currently have, so in the bill as it stands, or in the amendment as it stands, the providing temporary care and custody and care at such private residence for the pet vendors' animals, including but not limited to pregnant and lactating animals. I would like to strike the including but not limited, and have this bit just for lactating animals, and then have a separate facility for medical and behavioral.
you mean a separate definition?
It's separate definition.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay.
Because I think that,
No.
No? She says no.
okay, well,
Madam Chair,
I think you have a home one, and then I think you can have a facility one. And I'm only doing it based upon the rules that are currently in place, which he thinks are, which the commissioner didn't put in place but have been renewed, because those aren't really based on anything. So if we have to kind of align them. And then I assume once we align them, you might change them, right?
Yeah, we anticipated whatever happened with this
Exactly.
bill, assuming it was going to pass in some form, we would go back, even though the rules were just redone, we would have to
I
go
think
back.
making definitions are, yeah, I think making those two definitions, we can say pet vendor foster home, which is a private home, pet vendor facility. I think that's great. And then, and maybe in that amendment, we could put something in there, a line, giving you that authority to be able to put capacity stuff in there. So we don't necessarily have to come back.
I have a question for. So when you differentiate between the medical and the lactating, are you saying that lactating, because it already says facilities in the rules, right? So are you saying that medical should stay in the facilities and lactating should go to the homes, or why differentiate if they're both going to go to both places?
And they can go to both.
okay, maybe my objection doesn't make sense, so I'll withdraw.
Representative Scully and then Minor.
All right, quickly, I'm taking it all in. I would say if we're doing definitions, we could say pet vendor residential foster home and pet vendor facility foster home, and have that distinction made so somebody could see immediately that we've made that distinction when they're looking at definitions.
I like that. Yeah, Representative Minor.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Potenza, for saying it the way we should all see it. Just add the simple definition, and this bill we can move on from.
Okay. Any other discussion, or who's going to work on the amendment? Representative Potenza, are you going to?
I will.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
All right.
I literally got this thrown at me, but I'm in deep. I'm in deep now. So I was like, this is great. It's so simple. And thanks a lot, Commissioner Jasper.
Oh,
No,
you're
I-
more than welcome.
Okay, we'll move on now. We'll, any other?
I'd like to make one quick recommendation, which is that I think Representative Potenza, I think it would make sense for you and the commissioner to sit down together to work on this. Thank you.
I will.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to skip over to the,
Madam
because-
Chairman, could I, does anybody want what I read from or not? I mean, I can leave.
Sure. Yeah, we'll give it to the clerk. Or Rep. Potenza can use it as whatever. And so we're going to skip down to SB 624 because Representative Wheeler does have to leave, and he has an amendment that he's brought.
I have to leave with you.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Oh, yes, you do.
That goes to Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I am going to be very, very quick. I have to be in the State House at 2:10, but that was a good conversation, so I didn't want to cut us off. But there are two amendments that I've passed out to each member of the committee. One of them is 1375, and the other one is 1345. The one that I'll be talking about is 1345. It is the shorter version of the amendment. Just to really quickly give the background to this bill, this is a piece of legislation which I think all of us saw had merit. We're talking about a situation where convenience stores and gas stations across this state are selling what should be illegal products, labeled hemp, but are intoxicating and synthetic. And we have seen situations in this state, but across the country, where children, young children, people who are, 12, 11, 10 years old, are buying these products. Some of us, not me, but I remember a time when my mom used to tell me about, I'll give you a note and you go down and buy me cigarettes. Well, it's similar to that, although these things are not at all brought up in statute. And so children unknowingly see these products, candies, etc., and buy them. And the store clerk doesn't say, oh, you're too young, or they go out and they buy these products, they get high, and they get hurt. So the underlying merits of the bill are, I think, supported by everybody here on this committee. I'm somebody that supports legalization, but I support restricting these products. The problem with the underlying bill was that it included sections like lines 26 through 29, which is the third paragraph in the third section of the bill, that made illegal cannabis in this state. Regardless of our position on legalization, this legislature has authorized 3/4 of an ounce of cannabis to be legally sort of possessed by the people of this state in a decriminalized way. It's not a criminal penalty. There's no criminal penalties associated to possessing more than 3/4 of an ounce of cannabis. This piece of legislation would put into statute the illegalization of that decriminalization statute. So I took that out. I took out some of the other the sections around personal penalties, and I left it a piece of legislation. I've been calling it the Protect, Don't Punish Our Kids amendment, and that is
So
it's
What's the number of the amendment that we're talking about?
1345.
Oh, do you have a copy of that?
I passed it out.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't get one.
So this amendment 1345, it strictly bans this from being sold at retail stores and puts the punishment on retailers. So we're not punishing our kids who might have unknowingly purchased an intoxicating substance. We're just simply putting the penalties on the retailers who are selling these products in a way that's harming our children here in the state. So I have a couple of minutes here, but I can take any questions that anybody have.
So, yeah, I've got a question.
Please.
So insofar as, and thank you for your work on this, by the way. And so far as, that it says it shall not include products that contain more than whatever. There's no provision here requiring labeling.
Yeah, that's.
And so how would there be oversight over that? How would the seller know not to buy that from whatever wholesaler?
So those labels do already exist on those products, as far as I understood from Chief, I don't want to get your name wrong, but Armagenian, thank you. They have those labels already there, so the retailer right now can, there's a QR code, sort of barcode element to this that they can scan, and it goes directly to the certificate of analysis from whatever laboratory analyzed that product. So the retailer has the ability right now to scan whatever QR code exists on the product and find out which laboratory it was tested at, and then what it contains. That is not included in the bill here. You are correct, but I didn't think, based off the fact that they already have the ability to do that was entirely necessary. It is there in the other amendment. The other amendment is a little bit more fleshed out, but it included things that I ultimately, in that last minute out there in the hallway, while Chief and I and Matt Simon and some of the other stakeholders were discussing it, the shorter amendment just worked better for the Liquor Commission than the longer one. But
okay.
one thing to your point, though, the federal government has moved forward on an executive order. President Trump signed an executive order. Some of that language will be included in the final version of the amendment, but it last minute didn't make it in. But
And
so I could add that really easily if that's what the committee
so
wanted.
did you pass this by the sponsor of the original bill, Senator Gannon?
I did. Thank you for reminding me to bring that up. Senator Gannon and I had a conversation both yesterday and today, and I told him about the original amendment, 1345, and then the updated one, 1375. He was okay with both, but since we're moving on the shorter one, I'm sure he'll be more than happy that we have moved forward on the shorter one. But
All right.
he's
Good enough.
open to.
Representative Minor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for working on this, Representative Wheeler. So am I to understand that this is age restrictive, or this is just across the board, certain amount of THC is prohibited altogether?
So it's altogether, these synthetic products are prohibited based off of the definition in the amendment there.
Providing that it's below 0.4 milligrams?
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just real quick, it kind of goes back on your question, Madam Chair. So if these are banned, we don't have to worry about it because it's not as if the retailer's not buying from it. So I assume that'll be all communicated out through the commission, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And they're
So-
ready to do this. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And from what I know from having conversations with them after our hearing, most of these things are labeled. They are labeled. It's crystal clear what they are, but
Exactly.
it's just how, in a sense, that they are.
They're just subverting the whole legal
Correct,
process.
that they're
yeah.
marketed and all of that
Right.
stuff. Okay. And the other piece, because I think it's important having penalties there, I know that they were listed in the original bill, but based upon what I know, these penalties are already in place for minors, correct? I thought these penalties were in place for minors already. I thought these
Not in
fines and penalties were in place
not
already.
Not in statute, as far as I understood from working with OLS research on this. The penalties that were in the bill here would have added new penalties to the state statutes. Now, are children prohibited from using intoxicating cannabis products? Yes, but that is in the 300 chapters, and this would have made a new penalty for children's possession of the products.
New misdemeanors.
Yes, new misdemeanors and violations. Yeah.
Okay, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm grateful to Representative Wheeler for clarifying that the penalties would go to the vendors or the retailers rather than the consumers. And I think that's a really important designation. So
Representative.
Thank you, Madam
Scully,
Chair.
yeah.
Quickly, I know you have
No,
to get out of
please.
here.
No, I appreciate it.
I want you to consider, I will look at this again, but I think it is important that, that the labeling, we can't sell anything that doesn't meet the restrictions here. And we might want to consider just telling the vendors, if it doesn't have labeling, they can't sell it. So we could, only the things that meet the requirements of the law would be able to be sold in the city, in the cities and towns.
Yeah, I'm open to that. I'm open to that. Yeah. If I have a rebut, I'll rebut you when I have the information.
All right, anyone else? Representative Minor.
One quick question. I'm sorry to keep you here, Representative Wheeler.
No, it's okay.
The 0.4 milligrams, Why that threshold? What's significant about that amount?
Well, it's the existing law, as Representative Comtois says, but it's also the significance of that is you're talking about CBD products that are going to contain trace amounts of THC no
Sure.
matter what.
Yep.
And so this is the sort of way to make sure those products are not made illegal while still containing
Understood.
trace amounts of THC.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So is your intention perhaps to make another amendment that includes some sort of labeling
I can do that,
language?
yeah.
Okay, and that would be ready for next Tuesday that we can exec.
Easily, yeah.
All right,
Easily.
and we would be okay with doing that.
As soon as I have it, I'll send it off to the full committee so
Okay.
that people can take a time to look
Super.
at it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right, I got it down.
All right, good. Okay, so let's go back to, SB 418. Okay. Or actually, you know what, we could, yeah. Okay, where's everybody running off to? You going to a party? Okay. You know what, actually, let's skip down to, SB 465, classifying xylazine as a Schedule 3 controlled drug. So that's, 465. Okay, so 465, we heard about xylazine that with this bill, we want to change that to a Schedule 3. Yeah. And did anybody have any amendment to this or any problem with this bill at all? Representative King.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any amendment to this bill. I'm opposed to it. I've been against the war on drugs my whole life. I'm not going to go into a tirade on why I'm against the war on drugs, but to me, this just seems like more drug warrior stuff to me. I don't like that. If we turn it into a Schedule 3 drug, it's going to come with more regulation. It's going to increase the cost of the drug. So your vet bills are going to be higher. And is it really going to keep it out of the hands of criminals and out of the hands of drug users? And even if the answer is yes, which I don't believe, they'll just go to the next thing. I mean, my whole life, it's been playing whack-a-mole with things people want to put in their bodies. Okay. And it seems like it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. I mean, what are they going to, after xylazine's gone, what are they going to inject next? You know, it's like, this to me, I don't see solving this through the criminal justice system. I think this is a health issue. It's a spiritual issue. We should be treating people instead of throwing them in prison. And like I said, I'm not going to go into a whole long tirade, but to me, this bill I'm unimpressed with it.
All right, Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand the need for this bill, and I understand why they want to make it a Schedule 3. I know that we've heard testimony that it won't affect farmers, but I actually do believe that it may. Right now we're excluding veterinarians from this, from prescribing it to farmers. But as a Class 3 drug, will those farmers actually be legally able to have that on hand and administered to the animals as a Class 3 drug? Just asking the question.
So, anybody else have any other comments about that? Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could we ask one of our vets to address the question?
Sure. Would you like to come in? All right. No, we'd actually like to have you weigh in on, especially what Representative Comtois is concerned about. I guess this says that that notwithstanding paragraph 1, nothing in this section shall prevent any licensed veterinarian from doing any of the following: dispensing or prescribing for or administering. Dispensing or prescribing for or administering. So does that, we're wondering, does that mean that a farmer who has that on hand on their farm, that they would not be included in that, or would they be excluded from that?
I don't think he got to hear because he was filling out his pink card.
Okay, well,
One more
come
time.
sit down, sure.
Yeah, well, some committees.
And,
you
and
have
we
to
don't
do it
need
in
a pink
advance,
card because
so-
this isn't the hearing, this is just the work session, but, I mean, I don't know if you wanna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My
Sure.
name is Dr. Nate Harvey. I am a large animal veterinarian in New Hampshire. You notice I changed my vest from my green Department of Agriculture vest to my black vest.
yes.
I'm here as a private citizen and a veterinarian, nothing to do with the Department of Agriculture. I'd like to make that clear.
Oh.
I did have a question, the question you're all asking. First, I'll start by saying that as a private veterinarian, a large animal veterinarian, I specialize in large animals, and I have a series of accreditations from my veterinary school and the American Board of Veterinary Practitioners, specifically in farm animal medicine. I'm the only one in New Hampshire that currently has that certification, and I use a lot of xylazine in my practice. It is probably the single most common sedative I use for large animals. It's a very safe sedative for large animals. It's the most commonly used sedative for large animals, and I can't imagine my practice without it. I mean, I honestly can't imagine all the procedures that I do: castration, twisted stomach surgeries, C-sections, dehornings. All those things require sedation if you're going to be fair to the animal, and local anesthesia with Novocaine or lidocaine, but I use xylazine a lot. And equine practitioners and bovine practitioners will share that sentiment. I do want to clarify, probably a lot of small animal veterinarians don't use xylazine anymore. It's not really used by small animal veterinarians very much, and I've spoken with my small animal colleagues. They have many other drugs, a wide range of other drugs, which we have in large animal as well, but they are expensive, and it really comes down to cost when you're discussing something with a food animal producer compared to somebody with a companion animal. So my understanding is that the small animal veterinarians are not as concerned about this bill as the large animal veterinarians. Getting to dispensation of this drug, I feel like having this be a controlled substance, this is my personal opinion, because I have other controlled substances on my veterinary truck when I go to the farms. There's ketamine, there's propofol, there's Valium, other painkillers and sedatives and things like that. Every time when we carry class 3 controlled substances, I have to carry a double lock box that goes within a separate lock box. I have to have camera surveillance. There's a lot of controls on my controlled 3 substances. I do use them when necessary. Of course, euthanasia solution is controlled. That's all very important. Xylazine for large animal veterinarians, in my opinion, I do understand the human safety. I do understand the addiction problem, but I think it's so important to have an exemption for large animal veterinarians. I myself wish that for large animal veterinarians, we did not even have to go through the controlled 3 substance procedures. The record keeping, the double, triple locking. I had to add new security features to my home to have my controlled substances because I practice out of my home. So cost also. Xylazine is relatively cheap and it's available. I'm afraid what it will do for farmers and the cost of the procedures that we do, the routine everyday procedures that I use xylazine for. If I now have to treat and purchase these products as I do with my controlled 3 substances and controlled 2 substances, it will change my cost profile for farmers for the most common, simple procedures. Any other questions? I hope that clarifies.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that testimony. I truly appreciate it. I do know some farmers that actually have it prescribed to them for especially when they're raising some of the non-amenable species. It makes, if they get tangled or something, it helps them alleviate some of the stress and the pain immediately while waiting for a vet. As a controlled 3 substance I'm not understanding all of it. For me, I'm concerned that they wouldn't be able to have that on hand. Is that correct?
It certainly would be much more difficult, and the regulations would impede me from ever leaving it on the farm. I use extreme scrutiny when I leave medications on the farm. I'll leave anti-inflammatories and pain medication. I'll leave antibiotics. I very rarely leave xylazine or any of my sedatives on the farm for obvious reasons. And if I do, I make absolutely sure they're kept away from children, they're properly labeled, and I really do strike the fear of God into the farmer of like what happens if this falls in the wrong hands. Even though it is allowed for me to prescribe that, I really try to limit leaving it on the farm. But there would be sometimes in some cases where an animal just for the following day after a surgery or procedure or a painful incident or an accident may need a series of small doses of xylazine that I would very carefully go through with the farmer and administer in a proper labeled procedure. I can't imagine doing that if it were a class 3 substance. It just, the liability would be immense in my mind. But it's a good question.
Well, couldn't we put a, along with notwithstanding paragraph 1, nothing in this section shall prevent any licensed veterinarian as defined in RSA 332 or any agricultural use? So that kind of covers the farmer who needs it for their livestock, is it not?
Yeah, but it's still it would be still a class 3 drug, and it's about the class
Oh,
of the
I see.
drug
Okay,
more than
gotcha.
anything else.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Representative Comtois and Representative King. I think that it's not going to stop it from getting into the hands of people who really, really want it. There must be some method for getting this drug to people who enjoy it. And it just seems like the repercussions on the useful end are too extensive.
Yeah.
So
So-
I agree that it should not be a level 3.
Okay. Representative Minor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And a question for the vet, and thank you for taking questions and testifying or giving your opinion on this product. Xylazine at this point is what schedule, what type of class is it in, and how easy is it to, obviously pretty easy depending on where you are, but how easy is it to get?
Yeah, currently xylazine, well, the class of product is called an alpha-2 agonist, and there are a series of other drugs, datomidine and some others that are in that class, an alpha-2 agonist. It's pretty easy right now. It's not controlled at all. I, as a veterinarian, can call my distributor and order it. I have a relationship and a prescription set up with my distributor, a drug distributor that I get my antibiotics and anti-inflammatories from. I also order, like all veterinarians do, my sedatives and my controlled substances from my distributor. And depending on the level of controlled, class 2, 3, or not controlled at all, that decides how easy that comes. And xylazine is very easy. It is sent to me in a package, insulated. It's not locked. I don't have to submit any additional security codes. I don't really have to do much. It's very easy for a veterinarian to get it right now.
Well,
Sure.
would you agree that it might be too easy to get?
In my opinion, as a veterinarian, having shown my my credentials, my veterinary degree, and certifying all those things with the company, I feel, in my mind, if the veterinarians, I guess the question is, are the veterinarians the ones abusing it? Is that the channel where this drug diversion is happening? I don't understand it to be, but I could be wrong. In my opinion, I think the ease of use is critical for my practice, and at least from me and my colleagues, the drug epidemic which is happening, I don't personally know that the large animal veterinarians are the source, that ease of use is aiding that problem.
One more question?
Yeah.
Sure.
So would you agree that maybe a way to control this or to regulate it is to have your suppliers actually track the amount of xylazine that it's being sent to, let's say, different veterinarians in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I think that seems reasonable. My guess is, and I could be wrong, I do think the product is tracked. The volumes, the number of vials, the serial numbers, the expiration date on all those products are tracked and can be produced by the drug companies. They do that with all their products. I don't think it's unreasonable to try to seek a way that this is tracked more closely. That's a good question, and there could be a compromise there.
Thank you.
I just hope that it's not taken away from large animal veterinarians.
Representative Kenny.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. You also have to fill out quite a bit like triplicate forms to order any of the controlled substances. So if you were gonna have to do that for xylazine, that would be, a lot more, especially when you're ordering so much.
Yeah, it would be a true pain, and I will admit this as a practitioner. I can say this. This is myself. There are often times when the product I use on an animal is often influenced by the ease by which I can get that product and the amount of hours of paperwork I have to do that night when I get home for these controlled substances versus a simple one I can use that's just as effective and is cheaper for the farmer. So.
Representative Bixby.
So I'm not sure if this is totally in your wheelhouse, but is the only source of xylazine the manufacturers that are manufacturing it for the veterinary trade?
I'm not sure that. My guess is it's been used extensively, but originally, maybe years ago, even in the human health field, possibly.
So do you happen to know if there are illicit labs that are making it for street use?
I don't know that. My guess is it's somehow diversion of the product and it's tainting of. I heard somebody mention the high or the pleasure that people get. From what I understand, this product is being used to cut and taint powerful drugs like fentanyl and others. And there's really no pleasure gained from xylazine. It is used to cut other drugs, to essentially spread the amount that drugs can be distributed, and it causes terrible lesions. And it's not a pleasure drug. So.
Right. I guess what I'm trying to get at is would whether making it Schedule 3 would actually reduce the street supply or not.
That's a great question. I guarantee you that the United States DEA has extensive research about when they control a drug, the amount that then that drug becomes less used on the streets. My theory and my thought is it is possible. I don't know the answer, but it is possible. The question is, which somebody mentioned here, the cost versus the gain. Bless you.
Right. And am I correct in supposing that this is something that the federal government could schedule as 3, but has not, and so we would be sort of going beyond the federal government and doing that if we did that here?
The federal government certainly could, and I am aware that other states, we speak with our other state veterinarians and state departments of agriculture throughout the nation. Different states have taken different levels of state action into their own hands, doing that, not waiting for the federal government. You probably have all spoken with your colleagues in other states. So yes, the federal government could, and in some cases, other states have. They've gone all the way with restricting this drug.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one question for the committee,
Sure.
and you guys probably can explain this to me. Where it says, notwithstanding the provisions of RSA 318 relative to scheduling by rulemaking, the commissioner, xylazine shall be scheduled as a Schedule 3 controlled drug, and then below it, it essentially exempts large animal veterinarians or provides provisions that wouldn't interfere with their prescribing, administering, etc., to a non-human species, to an animal. Is that to say that the drug would become controlled, the drug would still be controlled for large animal veterinarians, but in some way the goal is to not inconvenience or slow down or interfere the prescribing and administering to? Or is it to actually exempt veterinarians from having to go through the Class 3 process and all of that? I don't think that.
I'm not actually sure on that, and I
Okay.
think that that's something that we really need to have clarified for us. Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that is a good question, and that's why I keep questioning this bill, because once you classify it as a Class 3, I don't know how you can exempt it
yeah,
for a
yeah.
special class of people.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Because I'm in favor of restricting it for abnormal or diverted human use. It seems to me the small animal veterinarians are not as concerned. So if there was a way to do that, I'd be in favor of carving out large animal veterinarians from having to deal with this. I just don't know if the wording does that. Sorry, Mark.
Well, I mean, I just posed a question to, of all things, ChatGPT, And classifying a drug as Schedule 3 does not typically keep it off the streets in the sense of eliminating its illicit presence, though it may change the dynamics of its availability. While scheduling imposes legal controls, historical data shows that illegal markets often persist or adapt even when substances are strictly controlled. So, I mean, I think that that's exactly what we've kind of been saying. Yeah. Not that that's an authority here, but I think historically we've kind of seen that. And I think it's just going to may cause a lot more problems than we're trying to solve. And so far as having the people who really use it and really need it be the ones be punished for the other problems that are existing because of it.
And may I add one more thing,
Sure.
Madam Chair? Dr. Prescott just made a good point. So as a cow specialist myself, I grew up on a dairy farm in Epping, and I work on cattle a lot. He made a good point that in equine practice, there are other alternatives, and it is an important tool, one of the most important tools in the sedative cabinet. But there are some alternatives that could be used. In the bovine world and in the ruminant world, all the animals that chew their cud, there really is nothing even close to this that I could even imagine using for the procedures that I use. It would be an incredible combination. It would take me a lot of research. It would really hinder my practice. It is the only drug I use for surgeries on cows. So just want to make that clear.
Do you know, Representative Haskins?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Nate. I don't remember your last name, forgive me. I just think your
Harvey.
testimony was influential, and I really appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you, Representative Haskins. It is awkward for me to get up here as a veterinarian, a private veterinarian, because I do have the role at the Department of Agriculture, and I want to make those roles separate here in this case. So make sure.
So
thank you.
noted. Yep. Anybody else want to weigh in or have anything to say about SB 465?
Matt,
Yeah, Representative
Chair.
Scully.
well, again, this is also a question if we're still in the research phase of this. So when we have these drug classifications of 1, 2, and 3, believe those are federal classifications. Is that correct? So if the state says it's a class 3 drug, does it make it a class 3 drug? Does it have to be done at the federal level to have all of the restrictions that would go along with a federal classification, even if we decided to treat it as one at the state level? I don't know. I'm just asking that question.
Well, I think, Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Representative Scully's point is that the state has the power to regulate, just like we have the power to regulate pesticides and fertilizer and everything else. We have the power to regulate what classes each drug is.
May I just have a follow-up
Sure,
question to that?
sure
Because
can.
I think you may know the answer. So then, do we also need to follow all of the requirements and restrictions that go along with the way the federal government treats it if we call it a class 3?
That I don't know.
Is that something our committee researcher can find out for us? Okay. So what was the other question that we had? We had a question that. Oh, yeah, whether if we just say that licensed veterinarians are exempt, what does that mean? Are they exempt from having to do the reporting and keeping the drug separate and all of that? So is that something, Ms. Ellis-Fresser, that you can find it?
Okay. Yeah, Madam Chair.
Sure.
It's kind of like a pesticide or anything else. Once we decide as a legislature or state to make something a class 3, even though we can exempt some of them from rules, the drug is still going to be a class 3.
Right. So you'd still have to go through. I think what this says is you can still use it, but you have to use it under the rules set forth by a Schedule 3 drug.
Correct. Thank
That's
you.
what I'm interpreting this to be.
Okay.
And I'd like Ms. Ausfresser to confirm that for us. Okay, so the way this bill is written right now, it exempts veterinarians from being able to use it and makes it illegal for everybody else. But they still have to, because it's a class 3, they would still have to go through and do all the reporting and locking it up and all of that. And I just want to confirm that. Okay, huh? I don't think they can be exempted from doing the reporting and all of that that goes along with a class 3 drug. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to do that with the other class 3 drugs that you deal with. Sure.
So back when you were talking about the transaction between you and your supplier, is there a gap in there that I seem to have a thing with gaps today, but is there a vulnerable spot in that transaction that people could get these drugs for humans?
That's a good question, and I'm sure that has been investigated. The vulnerability could be in shipping. The vulnerability could be once it arrives at my practice, if I didn't lock it up properly, or if I was diverting usage, or if somebody I didn't know, my employee, was diverting usage, and that's why we track these drugs. Most large animal veterinarians I know most of them are solo practitioners, and they go out to the farm and they bring the drugs themselves. They lock the drugs themselves up. There are veterinarians with technicians and staff, and that's one of the reasons why drugs become controlled, because that is an opportunity for drugs to be diverted. I haven't myself heard of that being a problem with xylazine in the veterinary field. I'm not the expert on that, but and there could be opportunities for diversion from before even the distributor gets the product, I imagine. Perhaps production, shipment, and distribution and storage by the distributor. I don't know where the risk of diversion is happening. If I knew that veterinarians and at the home and in the practice and perhaps in the farmer's hands was where the overwhelming risk for diversion was happening, I'd consider sucking it up and accepting this. But I really don't know that that's the case. I have not heard of that in my case.
And I wonder if changing the classification would change that that dynamic at all anyway.
Representative Gruber?
Yes, thank you very much for your reflection on the issues here, because clearly there's some issues. The other issue might be related is that if you make it a class 3 drug here, there's economic incentives, because the system's tighter, to for illicit sales, maybe from people coming out of state. So I know I worked in Eastern Europe when they had things illegal, and the black market started growing, and so it could create a secondary problem, I'm concerned.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments regarding this bill? Okay, so this is
one other, please,
Sure.
quickly, if I may. Well, it is kind of funny because the question that I guess I train myself to ask, is there demonstrated need? And I guess, and I don't remember from the testimony, they said this was a huge issue in New Hampshire, or whether any of the drugs that they might, combine with fentanyl, with this xylazine, if that's happening here in New Hampshire, is happening somewhere else and being brought in, and whether this self-imposed restriction we would put would have any positive impact, but could have some negative consequences.
I think the testimony we heard last week was that there definitely is a certain a noticeable amount of this on the street, and it's more prevalent in states further south, but it seems to be moving this direction. And there have been instances noted in New Hampshire, and so the question is, would turning it into Schedule 3 actually have any preventative value? And I'm beginning to doubt that.
I just want to note too that this bill and the one that we discussed prior, the hemp one, those two we must exec out next Tuesday. So just so that you're aware, we have to make a decision on those. Representative Bixby.
Yeah, my inclination, and I'm wondering if this is general among the committee, is that I don't know that there's any way to amend this to make it work.
Yeah. Representative Comtois.
Madam Chair, I am an ITO on 465.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm not inclined to exec anything today, especially as we have 3 members missing, 4 members missing. And I hope that we'll have more in attendance next Tuesday. But that's my sentiment as well. I mean, I know it's very well-meaning and that there is a problem, but I absolutely don't. I'm not convinced that making this a Schedule 3 drug is going to make any kind of difference, and I think it's going to only hinder the work of our veterinarians and our farmers. So anyway, that's where I am with that. Okay, let's talk now move on to SB 418, prohibiting municipalities. Or well, you know what? Why don't we'll do that one last. We'll do SB 644 because it's kind of quick. Requiring background checks for solid waste and hazardous waste facilities. And added an amendment on it that we wanted something from
I
the
think
Senate.
this is an obvious ODP, and we
Yeah.
could probably stop discussing it now.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else feel different? No? Okay. All right. So we would do that. Okay. Let's see. So that's more of a housekeeping thing. And then it leaves us with SB 418, prohibiting municipalities from requiring licenses for the production and sale of homestead food products, otherwise known as the pickle bill. And we've had some amendments flying around having to do with this. I know Representative Scully was working on this with Courtney Esbach in OLS. And I also know that Representative Bixby was bringing something. So how about we have a discussion about this?
So,
We have both amendments, correct?
there should be 2 amendments. Mine is 1377, and Representative Scully's is 1372.
It didn't get passed down.
I passed.
Madam Chair, I have Representative Bixby's, but do not have Representative Scully's amendment.
Oh, okay. So I have an extra one of Scully's here. That's.
Let's make sure everybody's got everybody's copies.
Oh, yeah, that's what happened.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so various attempts, Representative Scully and I both worked on doing some amending on this, and the upshot of my last conversation with Courtney Eschbach is kind of one of the crucial things that I didn't realize before is that the way that cities are authorized to be self-inspecting is by reference to town law. So, in the law, the statutes having to do with cities are in RSA 47, and in RSA 47, the one on health says that city councils need to follow the same laws as towns, and which means that anything you put into the section on town laws gets carried over to cities. So the only thing that and the section on town laws is 147:1. So that's the only place that we need to make an amendment. And there was one deficiency that I noticed and another deficiency that Representative Scully noticed. What I noticed was that the reference was only to 143A12, which is homestead licenses, and does not include the homestead exemption, which is in 143A5. So if you look at my amendment, it includes 143A5 and Roman 7, and 143A12. So that covers both the exempt and the licensed homestead food now. And what Representative Scully noticed was that it might be possible, even if a license wasn't required, there might be exclusions or restrictions that could be placed on things like food coming from another town into a farmer's market in a city. So Representative Scully added restrictions and exclusions, and beyond that, we're basically on the same page. So if we combine them, I think we've got it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I do. All right, we're going.
Does that sound good to you?
It does. Well, yes, there may be some objections, but it's certainly okay with me.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had talked to some folks, and then apparently Kelly, Representative Potenza, took it upon herself to pass, so we sent this out. But my suggestion is that we just put into statute that says all towns, cities, municipalities, and health offices shall enforce RSA 143-812 as written, and shall not make any other laws, rules, regulations, or provisions outside of RSA 143-812, which means that covers the whole thing with the homestead license. It covers the exemptions. It covers farmers markets, retail, all of it. The entire section of 143-812, they would not be able to make any rules or regulations regarding that. I think it's extremely important that they do not have the authority to do anything outside, whether it's in rules. And if we say that they shall enforce this, that doesn't give them any wiggle room to do anything else. I mean, that's just was my thoughts.
And as I read it, it's what Representative Bixby put out as his amendment is exactly what was in that email. So it's the same wording.
But he does do a clarification under his thing. He says, requiring license for activities or products exempt under RSA, or he specifically goes after just the products that are exempt. He does not make them enforce the entire chapter. And I think that's important.
Representative Scully?
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, yes, a couple of things. One, I saw this language, and I did discuss it with Attorney Eschbach, because again, I don't care about who provides the language. I just want to make sure we all get to the right place and do what we're able to do. I do think, again, we're discussing ideas, not people. The language proposed, that was proposed by Representative Comtois, has some problems that at least we should be aware of if we choose to adopt this and then make perhaps amendment, because an amendment would be necessary. I'll tell you, again, based on my conversation with Attorney Eschbach, what the issues are. Now, I don't know if you have it all in front of you, but I'll read it. It's not long. All towns, cities, municipalities, and health officers shall enforce RSA 143-812 as written, and shall not make any other laws, rules, regulations, or provisions outside of RSA 133-812. All right, so the first issue is that the first part of that sentence, all towns and cities, municipalities, and health offices shall enforce RSA 134-812, is something that really doesn't need to be said, because when we pass laws, of course they need to enforce the laws that we have, so we don't have to remind them of the fact that there's a law that they need to follow. The second part of this, it does say shall not make any other laws. Now, as you know, a municipality or a town cannot make law. So that's something that I think would need to be addressed if we want to use this language. And the way it's structured, I want you to listen to this and listen to it literally. And shall not make any other laws, rules, regulations, or provisions outside of RSA 143-812. What we're basically saying is they can't do anything. You can't do anything because of R 43-812. So again, this could be amended to fix that issue. But And you correctly pointed out that the fact that we're only the amendments that Representative Bixby and myself have provided deal only with exempt. And quite honestly, I think that's where we should be drawing the line right here. Because if we're trying to protect the little guy, somebody who's the small scale producer who the state has decided is such a low safety risk that they don't need any kind of licensing or inspection. Now, there's another tier in that law for people who want to take it to the next level. And now we're saying, well, you do need a license and you do need an inspection. And I don't feel entirely comfortable saying to a city, you know something, we the state think they need licensing and inspection, but you can't do it. Or you can't impose whatever restrictions you might have in the inspection process when we've already established that they have a serious enough potential health risk that they do need to be inspected. So I'm quite comfortable with the idea of saying the little guy, the exempt people are totally out of bounds here. You can't touch them. And that's what the amendment reads as written. With, again, I would certainly and happily include Representative Bixby's addition to this. And I think this is a no-brainer that would not be too how would one say it, controversial. Taking it to the next level and saying to the cities and towns, yes, it could be dangerous. It does. We know it requires inspection, but you have nothing to say about it. I'm not quite as comfortable with taking it that far. I am done now.
Representative Minor?
Thank you for that, Representative Scully, and thank you, Madam Chair. I will tell you that most farmers markets in concessions and things of that nature, they do require that the vendor has insurance, and they do check that insurance, and I think that's a safeguard that's built into this this whole bill as well, even though it's not necessarily known. But to Representative Scully's point, it's well taken.
Representative Compton?
So if we do that based on, and I understand the concerns, my concern is in 143A12, we talk about what hazardous food is. We talk about labeling. We talk about where you can sell, where you can't sell. We talk about sanitization, equipment and food storage. We also say that you can sell it at farmers market if you're exempt. If we just say, how do we enforce, because we've heard testimony that does not allow folks to come into certain cities because they're not licensed, because that's what the city requires. Even if they are following and they're exempt under the exemption, is the city going to say that they cannot attend farmers markets? Representative Bixby.
Yeah, I think that the language that Representative Scully put in, saying that the municipality shall not make regulations requiring licenses, restrictions, or exclusions for activities under or products that are exempt under 143A12. I think that the adding the restrictions or exclusions covers the issue of them saying that that someone couldn't be at a farmer's license, a farmer's market. So, well, I didn't read the whole thing. So neither the governing body of the municipality nor the health officers shall. So the negative was earlier in the sentence, and I didn't quote the whole thing. But there is, and another thing about this is that it is standard practice and statutes to phrase things as prohibitions. For what reason, I don't know, but that is the pattern, and which I think is another thing that we need to maintain. I think the language here actually does the job right, and and I think that I like Representative Scully's addition. I also liked his explanation, and I just want to make sure that we also have the 143A57 in there.
Well, I guess you were asking to speak first, so.
Representative Bixby, would your amendment also be added into, as part of his also? So you're going to
Yes.
combine them?
So, yes, so basically, I think we would just go with Representative Scully's and add in the
RSA.
additional,
RSA 143-A:5.
yeah, Roman 7. So so basically we'd combine them and probably using Representative Scully's as the base and then adding that one additional reference from mine.
All right.
I just have a question for Representative Scully. When you spoke with the attorney, were they comfortable that said, okay, with this amendment, they would be allowed to do these things that are listed in A4312?
Yeah, the exempt people, yes. I mean, and again, I think that's, as the bill was brought to us, it specifically was dealing with exempt folks with a small scale, the little guy or gal. And, yeah, so I think, yes, she was comfortable and said this would achieve the intended purpose.
Okay.
All right.
May I say one other thing,
You
please,
may.
regarding this? So the original amendment that was sent around that I think, a number of you signed on to, it had some secondary language, and this goes back to Representative Bixby's point, which is that the laws are somewhat parallel between the cities and the towns. And I had another section in there where I thought I was trying to make things a little more easily followed. Because when you look at RSA 47, it says all the powers given to the town should be given to the city council, but it doesn't tell you where those powers come from. And so I had added a section in there cross-referencing back to 147.1 because that's where the town powers are listed in law. It appeared to cause more confusion, I would say certainly with the attorney from the Senate side. And so I didn't consider this to be a hill to die on. I guess people who delve into this law regularly understand how this works. From my perspective as the layperson, I always thought it was kind of nice to have something that was easily understood. And when I was looking at where those powers are coming from, it kicked me over to where they are actually listed out. However, so that is the difference between, I didn't change the operative language of the amendment that a number of the folks in this committee signed on to, but I did remove that section because that seemed to be objectionable to the person on the Senate side. And as you know, we're trying to do this with the idea of getting approval from them also, because it has to go back to them. And I hope with a little bit of discussion, we can get them to agree to this tailored down version of the amendment.
Yep. Representative Gruber?
Yeah, I'm really pleased with where we're getting to on this. I only have one small, maybe it's a minor issue, but my feeling is that I know the laws you mentioned that are, people like the word prohibiting, could the title perhaps be exempting homestead food products, blah, 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 from these other regulations rather than prohibiting towns for one more thing? You mean, but go on the other frame.
Well, that came to us from the Senate, so.
Oh, you can't change the title. Okay. 'Cause
I
it's just-
don't know.
Actually,
okay. I'm not saying, but it just seems like it's really prohibiting local government to do this program.
I think that we can change the title, but I think in fact that in terms of what the bill actually does,
That
is
change the
accurate.
thing. Doesn't change.
So I think we need to leave it at prohibiting because
all
it
right.
says neither this or that shall do this. So
Okay.
that's a prohibition. And it is, as I've said before, for some weird reason, things in statute are done by prohibition.
Okay, thanks.
Representative Comtois?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one other comment. And I was wondering if instead of taking effect 60 days after passage, we could make it upon passage.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
Only because we have such a short season, especially with growing and things like that and farmers markets.
Yeah.
Okay, but now, by the way, so I think everybody who signed on to this, I have made a change where I've taken out that cross-referencing section. If that makes the amendment objectionable to anybody who's listed as a co-sponsor, please let me know, I'll take you off. Right now, I've got one spot left Now, it's funny because, again, the drafting attorney said, could you please just make this one person? Because apparently it complicates things.
Yeah.
But at this point, I've got 9. I'm going with 9. And if somebody wants to be the 10th, I know you had offered Representative Howard, Representative Bixby. I don't know if you guys want to flip a coin or.
I would suggest actually you just keep yourself on it just to make it easier for OLS and we can get that turned around quicker.
Is everybody okay with that? I
Yeah.
don't want to kick you off.
Yeah.
All right, I will do.
Okay, if you don't mind. So you're gonna add that other section and you're gonna make a change to the effective date. And those are the 2 changes to the amendment. Right.
Okay.
And that's to, amendment number 1372. Yeah. Okay, super.
Hey, we know something.
Great job. All right, so that does it for the discussion for the 5 bills that we heard. We have 4 more to hear, and do we want to fit them all next week to do them all? Hear them all? Okay. And so what we have is SB 442, which is changes the titles for pet health certificates to call them official certificates of transfer. So I guess they just want to change the name of it.
I thought that we already did that.
We're doing it again.
Maybe they didn't change it in all places.
Maybe it got missed in one spot.
Yeah, I think it probably,
Can we
Yeah.
executive right now?
no, let's not. So that's probably going to be what, a 5-minute hearing? All right, and then 445 is relative to adjudicative proceedings where there's a council or board with jurisdiction. And that seems like a pretty long bill. It looks also like some sort of housekeeping thing. So we'll have to read through that. All right.
Okay.
And then we've got SB 535, which is defining residential breeder and imported animal for the purposes of animal transfers and removing references to commercial kennels. This is another housekeeping bill, changing commercial kennel to pet vendor. So that's probably going to be like a 15-minute hearing. And 593 is allowing the use of funds from the Solid Waste Management Fund for solid waste management districts. And I think this is an add-on to what Representative Ebel's bill was. I guess they needed to include solid waste management districts because they weren't able to get the quarterly payments that municipalities were getting.
Okay.
So that's a housekeeping bill, and I think that's also probably going to be like a 10-minute hearing. So perhaps we can get all of those done in the morning, maybe? And then, well, do we have Senate hearings that people have to go to next week? Do we know?
There's one on the 15th, but I don't know about the 14th. 15th is the, I don't know if everyone knows about this.
The battery bill is on the 15th.
Battery's bill is on the 15th, and there's also the bill for what is ag in the classroom bill.
Oh, right.
So they were fine. They were totally fine with what we gave them, but they decided that would be a good vehicle to resurrect the bill that
For the Big E.
EDA killed on the governor announcing Big E each year.
I mean, really?
Okay, well, no, it's an issue. It's an issue. I mean, I know that eDNA, they don't like to make in statute that the governor does proclamations. But the Big E people have, especially Representative Dry, has complained to me that what happens is every year they go and they ask the governor for proclamation, and the governor's office says, why don't you just put this in statute? Why do you keep coming to us every year to do this? And then when we try to put it in statute, EDNA says, oh no, we should just ask the governor to do this every year.
I mean, we have our own building there.
I know.
I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Big E, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but we have our own building. We have it's New Hampshire businesses. It's
Well, I don't have a,
Basically, the idea is they want to put it on our egg in the classroom bill. I told Howard that I'd check and make sure that whether that was germane or not. I determined that it was in fact germane, and the way that it will come back to the House is that it will just come back as an amended bill, which we either have to
concur.
concur, or ask for a committee of conference. And Judy is the one that gets to make the recommendation of the motion,
I'm good to concur.
and which means that we can recommend concur, and maybe EDNA will have a couple of votes against it, but we should probably be able to win it.
I thought that bill was being heard this week for some reason.
In order to put the amendment on that bill, they have to do a non-germane hearing.
Okay.
So that's their thing.
Yeah.
But it'll come back to us on our bill, and we've already heard it in the House, so it's not really non-germane to us. And it's not incurring any cost either.
One other thing, Thursday, is there a plan for the paint bill?
No. From what I understand from Representative Hunt, they're not going to make any kind of move to overturn the veto.
Okay.
And he is working on language to be able to do these kinds of, if you want to call them product stewardship programs, in another bill that he's bringing forward next year.
Okay.
That businesses will be able to come together and do these kinds of programs.
Okay, so. Judy, what time are we meeting next week then?
So yes, we are now, don't forget, next Tuesday morning, we're going to have the Young Farmers Breakfast over at the
Farm Bureau in Concord.
On Sheep Davis. Yeah, Sheephill. There is parking there. And then we will, do you guys want to start maybe like at 10:30?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll start with hearings in the morning and then do I want to call it a work session for the afternoon, and then we'll see what we want to exec. But we do have to exec out the 2 drug bills.
Do you want to notice the drug bills as an exec and then have the rest of it as a work session? Which we can exec things out of it.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then we are call for adjournment today. Motion to
Okay.
adjourn. Yeah.
I just had a quick question for
Quick
you.
question, sure.
How do we know what's coming over from the Senate for concur and non-concur?
I don't know yet. I haven't heard anything.
Okay, thank you.
Usually Clerk Smith tells me. He's got
Okay.
paperwork for me. And I will not concur or non-concur on anything without touching base with you all first.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Sure.
Second.